In a land where a man could be sold cheaper than a horse, some souls still refused to bow. Evelyn Harper, 19, thought her life was over the day her father sold her to Vernon Hale, the ruthless rancher everyone feared. But fate doesn't end with a blow. It begins with the sound of hoofbeats rolling from the horizon. A lone rider returned to Dust Creek, not for gold, not for glory, but for a promise left undone. When her fire met his dust, the whole West trembled. A ranch burned, an empire fell, and from the ashes, a legend was born. They say that even now, when the sun sets over the hills, you can still see her silhouette riding through the dusk, eyes burning like wildfire, never once looking back. The sun hung over Dust Creek like a molten coin, its golden blaze pouring down on the cracked dirt road that ran through town like an old scar. Heat shimmered off the ground, crawling under every inch of skin until even the air seemed to tremble. In the middle of the square, where the wind carried the stench of whiskey, sweat, and flies, Evelyn Grace Harper sat in the back of a worn-out wagon, wrists bound with a frayed hemp rope. 19 years old, sun-browned face, clear eyes, dry cheeks. She hadn't shed a tear. Outside the Red Coyote Saloon, her father stood swaying on his feet, shirt half open, reeking of cheap whiskey. He let out a hoarse laugh and scratched his stubbled chin as he scrawled his name on the crumpled paper Vernon Hale held out. A bill of sale, plain and simple. Beside them, the old sheriff spat a line of tobacco onto the dust, eyes dull, saying nothing. In Dust Creek, silence was just another form of currency, and fear was what paid for it. Evelyn bowed her head. Sweat traced a path down her nose and disappeared into the dust below. She heard her father's slurred voice. "She's just a burden anyway. If you can feed her, she's yours." He laughed, a dry, cracking sound that died in the heat. She said nothing, just stared at the boots of the man in front of her, Vernon Hale, a broad, gray-bearded figure with eyes sharp as old steel. The wind tugged at his long duster, heavy with the scent of gunpowder, revealing a silver-worn revolver on his belt. He studied her like a man inspecting livestock. "Do you follow orders?" he asked, his voice gravel-deep, cold. Evelyn didn't answer. Vernon tilted his head, half smiling. "Good. I don't care for talkers." He reached into his coat and tossed a small leather pouch to the sheriff. When it hit the ground, the sound of gold coins broke the air, coins stained dark, as if with dried blood. The square went still. A wagon driver swallowed hard and turned away. No one asked where the blood came from. In Dust Creek, some truths were better left buried. The sheriff picked up the pouch, gave it a quick shake, then nodded. "Deal's done." He turned away without another glance at the girl. So did her father. He stuffed the signed paper into his pocket, and staggered back into the saloon. The door slammed behind him, like a coffin lid closing on the last of her family. Evelyn watched, her face unreadable. No anger, no tears, just a hollow chill sinking into her chest. Vernon turned and signaled his driver. "Take her to Ravenshade," he said, voice low and rough as shifting sand. Before climbing into the carriage, he paused, squinting up at the blazing sky. A thin smile cut across his face as he exhaled a ribbon of smoke. "Hot day," he muttered. "Good weather for planting a new season." Inside the saloon, someone stirred. A man sitting in the corner, a shadow among shadows, lifted his eyes from a half-empty glass of whiskey. He watched the girl being led away, his jaw tight beneath a few days' stubble. The brim of his hat cast a line of darkness across his face, but his eyes, cold and haunted, caught the light. Cole Granger. No one knew where he came from. He just whispered to himself, low enough that only the flies could hear. "Dust Creek ain't done yet." The wagon rolled away, wheels grinding over the dirt, raising a red cloud that burned in the sunset. Evelyn didn't look back. Her gaze fixed on the road ahead, the wild plains swallowing the horizon. And somewhere in the distance, a horse neighed, long and sharp, like a call from fate itself. The heat pressed down as Dust Creek fell silent again. Vernon Hale stood tall in the square, his shadow swallowing what little light was left. He walked toward the girl, each step striking the earth like a hammer. "Look up," he said. Evelyn stayed still. The rope bit into her wrists, drawing a thin line of blood, but she didn't flinch. Vernon crouched down, rough fingers lifting her chin. He studied her face like a rancher judging a wild mare. "Do you obey?" he rasped, half command, half taunt. Evelyn met his stare. No fear, just a cold, endless calm. A dry laugh rolled from his throat. "Good. I don't like backtalk." He lit a cigarette and blew the smoke across her face before standing. The sheriff nearby took off his hat, wiping his brow. He counted the coins in Vernon's pouch, the metallic clink echoing faintly, then stuffed it away. "That's the end of it," he muttered. "Ain't my business no more." Vernon nodded, eyes already elsewhere. He gave Evelyn one last look, half pity, half pleasure. Her father slumped on the saloon steps, sneering through the haze of liquor. "Got yourself a roof now, girl," he slurred. His voice was soaked in whiskey and regret. Evelyn didn't respond. Her eyes were dry, her face carved in silence. "Untie her," Vernon said to his man. "No need for ropes. She's learned fear." But when the rope fell, Evelyn rose, slow, steady, unbowed. Something in that movement made Vernon stiffen. There was defiance in her stillness, something untamed, as if she weren't the one being bought, but the one waiting to see what price he'd pay for his mistake. From inside the saloon, Cole Granger shifted again. He set his glass down, sunlight catching the scar across his cheek. Pulling his hat low, he murmured, "Dust Creek ain't done yet." No one answered. Only the sound of hooves fading into distance, dragging a red haze behind. Evelyn didn't yet know it, but from that moment on, her fate had been rewritten, in silence and in gunfire. If you were there, whose side would you stand on? Hamcho. Evelyn. The girl sold to fate. B. Cole. The man who watched and is about to intervene. Or maybe you'd choose your own path. Tell me in the comments, so I know you're still riding with this story. The sun was long gone by the time Vernon's wagon rattled into the last stretch of wasteland. The wooden sign ahead creaked in the wind. Ravenshade Ranch, its letters cracked and half-eaten by sand. The road leading in was nothing but rock and ruin, flanked by yellowed grass and dead trees that jutted from the plains like skeletons refusing to lie down. In the back of the wagon sat Evelyn Harper, wrists raw and swollen from the ropes. Her gaze stayed cold and steady on the house waiting in the dark, a place folks called a home, though she already knew better. It was a prison made of wood and dust. The ranch was a sorry sight. 2 sagging barns, a broken windmill, and a dry well filled with nothing but grit. The air stank of rust, manure, and rot. A gray old dog lifted its head from the porch, growling weakly as Vernon climbed down. He didn't even glance at it. With a flick of his hand, he signaled Evelyn to get off. "From now on, this is where you live," he said, voice dragging like gravel. "Don't talk, don't run, and never, ever go near the hill out back." Evelyn stood still, the wind whipping her dress, dust catching in her hair. "If I break a rule?" she asked quietly. Vernon squinted, a cruel line forming on his lips. "Then you'll wish you were back in that wagon." He laughed, a dry, cracked sound that fit the land too well. Inside, a dim oil lamp threw weak light across the single room. There was a table, a few rusted pots, and a pile of hay shoved into the corner where a bed should have been. Hanging above Vernon's cot was an old shotgun, its barrel blackened from years of use. You sleep there, he said, pointing to the hay. Get used to it. Tomorrow you rise before the sun. Feed the horses, clean the floor, fetch water from the well. And remember, he looked back at her, eyes narrow. Don't speak unless I say so. When he left, Evelyn sat down on the straw. Her wrists still burned, blood seeping through the fresh rope marks. She touched them gently, the sting pulling her back to reality. Wind howled through the cracks in the walls, carrying the faint clink of chains from the stables outside. She looked around. Every corner was thick with dust. Every board groaning like the house itself was alive and unhappy. Night came heavy. The ranch drowned in black silence. The broken windmill creaked in the wind, its moan echoing across the plain like the cry of something long dead. Evelyn lay still, eyes wide open. She could hear Vernon moving in the next room. Then nothing. Only the wind. Only her heartbeat. Then, a sound. Faint, but real. From beneath the rocky hill behind the ranch came the scrape of metal against stone, followed by a low, trembling groan, half human, half beast. Evelyn froze. The noise dragged on for a few seconds, then stopped, swallowed by a silence so deep it hurt to breathe. She rose slowly, peering through the narrow window. The crescent moon threw a pale glow over the low mound behind the ranch, the one he told her never to approach. Something like smoke curled up from the cracks in the earth, thin and gray, like the breath of something sleeping beneath. A chill ran through her. Whatever lay beneath Ravenshade, it wasn't just soil and rock. This wasn't a ranch. It was a graveyard with chores. Morning broke weak and dusty. Sunlight bled through the cracked shutters, striping the floor in pale gold. Evelyn sat curled in the corner, caught somewhere between sleep and dread. Outside she heard Vernon shouting, the whip cracking through the air, a horse neighing in protest. Then silence again. When she was sure he'd gone, she stood. The floor creaked under every careful step. The place was bare, a crooked table, a few empty bottles, an oil lamp burning low. But something felt off. Near the stove, a patch of floor seemed slightly sunken, as if hiding something beneath. She knelt, brushing away dust. The boards were rough and cold. Evelyn took the small kitchen knife she'd stolen the night before and wedged it into a crack. A sharp click sounded. One plank lifted loose, revealing a dark hollow just big enough for a hand. Her fingers brushed against something metal. She pulled it free. A tin box, green paint peeling, edges eaten by rust. Inside lay a folded piece of lace, yellowed with age, a faded photograph, and a small brass key. She lifted the photo. Beneath the grime, the face of a young woman emerged. Black hair, soft smile, eyes that seemed too sad to belong to that smile. Evelyn didn't recognize her. On the back, in shaky ink blurred by time, were 5 words. If you find this, run east. Evelyn's heart skipped. She read it again and again, afraid she'd imagined it. Run east. Someone had been here before her, someone who'd tried to warn her, or leave a dying message. Her hand trembled. The little key clinked softly against the tin's edge. She looked toward the window. East. That was the road back to Dust Creek. Or maybe freedom. Then, bang! The door slammed open. Evelyn spun around, heart hammering. Vernon stood there, eyes hard, voice low and rough. What the hell are you doing? She snapped the lid shut, shoved the box back into the hollow, and slid the board into place just as he stepped closer. Her hands were dust-covered, trembling. I was cleaning the floor, sir, she said, forcing her voice steady. Vernon narrowed his eyes, sniffed the air like a hound. Didn't know dust smelled this clean. Evelyn bit her lip, said nothing. Finally, he spat on the floor and straightened up. When you're done, fetch water from the well. Don't wander. When he was gone, Evelyn slumped against the wall, cold sweat tracing her spine. She reached for her hairpin, slid it out, and carefully tucked the tiny key into her dark, tangled hair, hiding it where no man would find it. Her eyes flicked toward the patch of floor where the tin lay buried. Outside, the wind howled across the dead grass, a low, warning hum that wrapped around the house like a ghost's breath. She knew now. Ravenshade was keeping more than one secret, and someday that little brass key would unlock every single one of them. If you were here, whose side would you stand on? Oh, hey, Evelyn, the girl uncovering secrets in the dark. B. Vernon, the man guarding things best left buried. Or would you choose another path entirely? Tell me in the comments, so I know you're still riding with this story. The second night at Ravenshade Ranch was so still, even the wind seemed to hold its breath. The moon hung low, casting a cold silver wash across the dying fields. Evelyn lay on her bed of straw, eyes wide open in the dark. The smell of dry grass, old ash, and rust pressed against her lungs. Every creak of wood, every whisper of wind made her heart twitch. But tonight, something felt different. A presence, a stirring in the dark she couldn't name. She sat up, pulling aside the ragged blanket. Through the small window, she could see the outline of the hill, where sand met shadow. Then, a spark, a flicker of light, the sharp hiss of a match igniting against the night, and gone again, just as quick. Evelyn held her breath. 1 heartbeat, 2. Then the flame returned, this time lasting longer. In that trembling glow, she saw him. A rider, motionless. His shadow stretched long across the dirt, like he'd been carved from the same darkness he stood in. He didn't move closer, didn't turn away, just sat there, still as stone, the light catching half his face, rough, quiet, unknown. Then the flame died, swallowed by night. She waited, heart pounding. Nothing. No hoofbeats, no wheel tracks, no one else for miles. When she lay back down, sleep refused to come. The image of that match haunted her. Its glow, that silent figure. Was it Vernon? A drifter? A bounty hunter? Or someone trying to send a message? That night stretched on forever, heavy as a storm that never broke. By dawn, the sky bled into copper and gold. The old house glowed faintly beneath the new sun. Evelyn went about her chores as usual. Vernon said nothing, just tossed her a tin bowl of dry rice and a cup of murky water. She ate quietly, eyes on the table. That's when she saw it. A folded scrap of paper tucked beneath the rim of the bowl. Her fingers trembled as she lifted it. The words were smudged, written fast, but clear enough to read. Do not fear the wolf. Evelyn mouthed the words under her breath. The wolf? There hadn't been wolves in this part of the West for years. So what did it mean? A warning? A sign? She looked up, heart racing. Vernon sat on the porch, carving tobacco with his pocket knife, not paying her any mind. Evelyn slipped the note into her sleeve. Whoever had left it must have been close enough to touch her bowl, close enough to know she needed a reason to hope she wasn't completely alone. All that day, she worked with her eyes drawn to the ridge, where she'd seen the spark. The wind carried the scent of hot sand and something else, something alive just out of sight. For the first time since she'd been sold, she felt it, a presence that wasn't cruel, a watcher, maybe even a savior. The morning passed quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that comes before a gunshot. Evelyn knelt by the porch, washing dishes in a half-dry basin, when Vernon stepped back inside. His gaze swept across the room, then stopped. On the table. The note. She'd forgotten to hide it. He picked it up, his thick brows pulled tight. The lines on his face hardened to stone. "What the hell is this?" His voice came out low and dangerous. Evelyn froze. "I don't know, sir. Maybe someone left." The slap came fast and hard. Her head snapped sideways. The sting burned across her cheek. "Don't lie to me!" he roared, the sound crashing through the empty house. "Who put this here? Who's been near my land?" Evelyn stayed silent. She knew the more she spoke, the worse it would get. Vernon grabbed her by the hair, yanking her to her feet. His eyes were clouded, the color of dead water. "Speak," he growled. She met his gaze, not crying, not pleading. Just silent. That silence cut deeper than any answer. "Fine," he hissed, dragging her toward the door. "You want quiet? I'll give you quiet." He shoved her across the yard, dust whipping against her face, through the crooked stalls that reeked of rot and manure. The wooden door slammed open. He threw her inside and dropped a heavy iron bar across it. "No food, no water, not till I know who's been sniffing around here." The latch slammed. Darkness swallowed her whole. Evelyn curled against the wall, her breath ragged. Heat pressed in from every side, thick as tar. Outside, the wind moaned against the boards. Hooves clattered, faded, then vanished. Silence. Again. So complete she could hear her own heartbeat. She stood slowly, hands feeling along the walls. Rough wood, carved and splintered. Then her fingers brushed against something. Grooves, letters, names, scratched into the timber with a blade. Mary, Liza, June, each one shaky, desperate, carved by hands that had run out of hope. Her throat tightened. How many women had been locked here before her? She traced the markings, following the grain until the moonlight slipped through a gap in the roof, just enough to reveal one more name, fresh and raw, sap still oozing from the wood. Grace. She froze. Grace Harper. Her mother's name. The woman they said died of fever years ago. Evelyn's breath caught. Her trembling hand pressed to the letters as if she could still feel the warmth of her mother's touch there. It wasn't possible, and yet, it was right here. No tears came. Just a fire, slow and fierce, building beneath her ribs. The truth burned sharper than any whip. Her mother had been here, locked in this same stall, and Vernon Hale, the man who owned this place, had buried that truth beneath the dust. Evelyn lifted her eyes to the crack of light cutting through the door. Outside, the sun was sinking, washing the fields in a deep red glow, the color of old blood. The fear was gone now. All that remained was flame. If you were standing there, whose side would you take? Oh, Evelyn, the daughter who uncovered her mother's buried truth. B. Vernon, the man hiding sins beneath Ravenshade's dust. Or maybe you'd choose another road entirely. Tell me in the comments, so I know you're still riding with this story. Noon in Dust Creek was too quiet. The kind of quiet that made the air heavy, like the whole town had stopped breathing. No wind, no dust, just heat and silence when Cole Granger rode in from the sunburned road. His shadow stretched long across the cracked earth, and each step of his horse hit the ground with the sound of a hammer on a coffin lid. He wasn't dressed like a bounty man. No dark coat, no silver spurs, just a worn canvas shirt and a wide-brimmed hat that hid half his face. But what made folks look away wasn't the hat. It was his eyes, cold, deep, and full of the kind of sorrow that only the desert could teach. He stopped in front of the Red Coyote Saloon, where every story in Dust Creek began and ended the same way, in silence. The door creaked open, its hinges screaming like a warning. Card players looked up, then looked down just as fast. The piano went quiet mid-note. Cole walked in slow, boots striking the floor with a dry, hollow sound that filled the room. He didn't glance around. He just reached the bar, pulled a silver coin from his pocket, and set it on the counter. "I'm looking for Vernon Hale." The whole saloon froze. The bartender's hand trembled, whiskey spilling over the rim of the glass. A man near the door muttered, "Best not say that name round here, stranger." Cole didn't turn. His voice came low and steady. "I didn't ask for advice. I asked for directions." The barkeep, an old man with white hair and eyes like weathered glass, swallowed hard. "He lives out by Ravenshade Ranch, near Horseshoe Canyon. But if you're wise, you'll ride the other way. Ain't no one that goes there comes back." Cole met his gaze without blinking. "I used to live there." No one breathed after that. The kind of words only a man with ghosts in his past could say. Cole picked up the coin, flipped it once, then left it behind as he turned toward the door. Before he could reach it, a thick-necked man in the corner snorted. "If you lived there," he said with a sneer, "how come you're still breathing?" Cole stopped. The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. He turned just enough for the light to catch the scar running down his jaw. "Because I ran fast enough," he said quietly, "and someone else didn't." The man shut his mouth. Cole pushed through the door and stepped back into the sun. The heat hit him square in the face, and for a moment, the desert lit up the memory he'd spent years trying to bury. A girl named Liza, her blonde hair shining in the lamplight, her soft smile, and that night. He'd worked for Vernon once, just another hired hand at Ravenshade. Thought it was honest work, until he saw Vernon drag Liza toward the cellar. Heard the gun, heard her scream, and then the silence that followed. By sunrise, all that was left was a blood-soaked handkerchief. He'd run that night, the sound of her voice chasing him clear into the desert. From that moment, he swore, if he ever lived long enough to return to Dust Creek, he'd make Vernon Hale pay. The wind rose suddenly, kicking red dust around his horse's hooves. Cole pulled his hat lower, muttering under his breath, half vow, half prayer. Blood debt don't wait forever. That same afternoon, the light over Ravenshade Ranch grew dull and weary. The wind had changed. It carried the scent of smoke from burning grass on the hill. Evelyn was sweeping the yard when she noticed it. A scrap of paper pinned beneath the tin plate she always used to bring Vernon his meals. She glanced around. No one. Vernon's heavy steps sounded from the stables, slow and careless. Her hands trembled as she lifted the note. The words, scrawled in charcoal, were quick and rough, but clear enough. 3 nights. Be ready. 3 nights. She read it twice, then clenched the paper tight and slipped it into her sleeve. She didn't need to guess who sent it. The rider on the ridge. He was coming back. From that moment, every nerve in her body tightened like a drawn bowstring. She began to prepare, quiet, patient, the way a wounded creature learns to hunt again. While Vernon slept, she hid a small knife beneath the straw. At each meal, she tucked away bits of stale bread and a half-empty flask of water under the wood bin. Each night, she looked toward the hill where she'd once seen the flare of a match in the dark. Something in her had shifted. Fear was turning into resolve. But she wasn't the only one who sensed the change. Vernon had grown uneasy. He no longer left the house without his shotgun. His eyes darted from corner to corner, haunted by the echo of his own steps. Every creak made his finger twitch. He drank more, slept less, and every time the door creaked open, he was already half a breath from pulling the trigger. "Someone's been here," he muttered, eyes sliding toward her like a knife's edge. "I can feel it." Evelyn kept her head down, peeling a dry potato with calm precision. "No one's come, sir," she said softly. But in her heart, she was counting. Night 1. Gone. Vernon fell asleep drunk, the shotgun propped by his bed. Evelyn rose without a sound, stepping to the door. The sky was black and heavy, the wind carrying a strange chill. She looked toward the ridge. He was there. The rider. Closer this time. Tall, silent still, but clear as day in the moonlight. She saw the glint of metal at his side. The silver of a gun. She didn't know his name. Hadn't seen his face, but something in his stance told her he wasn't a hunter. He was waiting. For her. She turned back inside, pulse hammering. Vernon shifted in his sleep, mumbling something dark. His hand brushed the gun. Evelyn froze against the wall, breath shallow, sweat tracing her neck. One sound, one wrong move, and everything would end before it began. The second night passed. She marked it on the doorframe with a shallow cut of her knife. Then she lay back down, eyes open, listening to the wind as it scraped across the plain. The air smelled of dust and storm, of change. There was one night left, and when it came, no one at Ravenshade would sleep again. If you found yourself here, whose side would you take? Auta, Evelyn, the girl waiting to turn her fear into freedom. B. Vernon, the man who feels the darkness he built closing in. Or maybe you'd ride your own trail. Tell me in the comments, so I know you're still with this story. That night, the sky tore open like black cloth, the wind howling through Ravenshade Ranch. Evelyn sat against the wall, clutching the knife hidden in her sleeve. The house held its breath with her. Then the front door creaked open. Cole Granger stepped inside, dust clinging to his coat, eyes burning under his hat. "Ready?" he asked. Evelyn only nodded. She pried up the floorboard, pulling out an old tin box. Inside lay lace, a brass key, and letters scorched at the edges. Her hands shook as she read her mother's words. "My name is Grace Harper. If anyone finds these, save my daughter. He will kill me, as he's killed the others. Ravenshade is where he buries his sins." Evelyn pressed the letter to her chest. Cole's voice softened. "She left you the truth. Now you've got to use it to stay alive." From far off came the sound of hoofbeats. Vernon Hale was coming home. The door burst open. Vernon staggered in, drunk, shotgun raised, his eyes locked on Cole. "You came back. Betrayal stinks a mile off." Then he turned to Evelyn. "Her brat is right here." The truth slammed into her. Grace, the photo, the carved name. Her body shook, but her eyes burned. Cole's hand tightened on his revolver. "You killed her, like the rest." Vernon sneered. "I fed you, boy. Kept you alive. Without me, you'd be nothing." Evelyn's whisper trembled. "You're his son?" Cole met her gaze. "Yeah, the bastard he threw away." Vernon roared and pulled the trigger. The blast tore the air, but Cole's gun was faster. Vernon crashed back, blood spreading across the floorboards. He snarled through the pain. "You're my blood! You owe me!" Cole raised his revolver, voice steady. "No, I owe it to my mother, and every soul you buried here." His second shot echoed like thunder. Vernon fell, eyes open and empty. Then, with a final gasp, Vernon reached for the shotgun. Evelyn lunged, knife flashing. The blade drove deep into his chest. His body jerked, then stilled. Silence spread through the house. The smell of gunpowder and blood clung to the walls. Cole stared at the corpse, shoulders heavy with years of rage. Evelyn backed away, trembling, but calm. The fear that had haunted her was gone. It had died with Vernon Hale. If you were standing in that room, whose side would you take? A. Evelyn, the girl who ended the darkness with her own hands. B. Cole, the man born of sin and redemption both. Or maybe you'd choose another road entirely. Tell me in the comments, so I know you're still riding with this story. Dawn was breaking when Evelyn and Cole dragged Vernon's body out of the house. The cold mist clung to the smell of gunpowder. The wind cut through the broken fence, sounding like chains rattling in the dark. They chose to bury him behind the old stables, the same place he once used to cage others. Evelyn dug in silence, every shovel of dirt heavy with the years stolen from her youth. Dry blood stained her shirt. Each strike of the spade was another piece of her past laid to rest. When the hole was deep enough, they dropped him in. No prayer, no cross. Just a torn blanket to cover what was left of him. Evelyn looked down at the man who had once owned her fear. "You taught me what it means to be afraid," she whispered. "Not anymore." She handed Cole the old tin box, the lace, the faded photo, and her mother's unsent letters. Then she placed it on top of the body. "I've come home, Mama," she murmured. But she knew she couldn't stay. Cole struck a match. Evelyn tossed a bundle of oil-soaked hay toward the house. The flame caught quick. A single spark turned into an inferno. Ravenshade Ranch went up in a roar. The house, the well, the barn, and every ghost that ever haunted them. Evelyn stood tall, letting the firelight wash over her face. For the first time, she looked straight into the blaze, straight into the hell that had once owned her, and didn't look away. Cole's voice came soft beside her. "You're free now." She smiled faintly, exhausted but steady. "No," she said. "I'm just learning what that means." The fire roared once more, then collapsed into ash. Morning came, the sun spilling over the smoking ruins, turning the land from cursed to calm. Evelyn knelt, scooping a handful of warm soil. "I'm home," she whispered. Cole saddled his horse in silence. They both knew the road they'd shared ended here. He tore a scrap of paper from his pocket, wrote a single line, and placed it on a stone near her feet. "You're stronger than you know." Then he turned, mounted up, and rode into the pale light, his lone silhouette fading into the horizon. Evelyn let the note go. The wind caught it, carrying it over the fields. She stroked the old gray horse's neck, swung herself onto the saddle, and held the gun that was once forbidden. Each hoofbeat on the dry earth was a farewell. Behind her, Ravenshade was nothing but smoke. Weeks later, stories began to spread across the West, about a girl on a gray horse, eyes like fire, smile like steel. In every forsaken town, every busted saloon, wherever law and mercy had both gone missing, she came. And when she left, the wicked were gone, or left behind tied to a post with a note pinned to their chest. Paid due. They gave her many names: the girl with fire eyes, the dust widow, the daughter of the sands. Those who had seen her swore that when she rode past, the light followed, and even the dust dared not rise to disturb her. And in every tale there was one more shadow, a man on a black horse riding a few miles behind, saying nothing, watching over her with a faint smile whenever the wind changed. Evelyn didn't know where the road would end. She only knew this: wherever darkness still lingered, her fire would ride there too. They said she was just a ghost in the dust, but legends don't die, they ride. And so the fire of Evelyn Harper closed one chapter written in blood and ash, only to open another, where freedom isn't a gift, but a fight. On that harsh land where mercy was rare and justice came late, the girl once sold like a piece of property became something greater, a legend, a symbol of the forgotten, the broken, the unyielding. If this story reminded you of a time when folks still lived by honor, grit, and heart, leave a like, a comment, or share it with someone who still believes in stories where the truth bleeds, but never dies. Because sometimes, by keeping these tales alive, we keep alive the part of the past where justice, even late, still finds its voice. And don't forget to stay with us. The West still has winds that carry stories, and some legends never stop writing.